Few stories. No joke, guys. I'm about to tell you some stuff that I still shake my head and say, Lord, you're marvelous. I was in Chicago. I was about to negotiate a major contract. I walk into the meeting with my head full of facts and figures. You know, the job's on you. You got the negotiation. You got the ball. Walking in with my head full of facts and figures and what are my strategies and how am I going to win the argument. The counterpart across the desk says to me, Simon, I just don't get the book of Revelation. Let's talk about that. We ended up having this completely separate conversation about the book of Revelation. I ended up writing him a note because we were there together for a short time, and the conversation cannot be answered in one little visit. But I gave him Scott Hahn's book, The Lamb's Supper. It's the book that unpacks the Revelation from the Catholic perspective. And I wrote in the first page, I'm like, I have to give you the answer, and I want to answer your good question, but you got to read the book. So one instance where, yes, it was read in a book. But I certainly started the momentum, okay? Small pebble starting an avalanche, as Tolkien said. Another one. I'm traveling with a teammate, this time in the eastern United States. And again, it just falls out in the conversation as we're in this car for 4 hours. She's a Catholic, I'm a Catholic. She's a woman who's contracepting in her marriage. And is intensely triggered by the fact that I see things differently. That I believe in the honor and the dignity of marriage and that contraception is an evil opposed to that. And again, it's not an argument, guys. I'm not trying to win on the intellect thing. She's a hurt and damaged lady who's admitted something that's very intrinsically wrong in her marriage. But suddenly, we enter this intense debate about the theology of the body, okay? John Paul II's amazing unpacking of sexuality and God's gift to man and woman in that. And I remember not just defending the church's teaching, but suddenly witnessing to the glory of marriage, God's original design for man and woman, and the dignity to be life bearers that he bestowed on women in that. So suddenly she's getting the argument all turned around because I'm not challenging her and arguing with her and trying to throw the law at her. I'm affirming her glory. I'm speaking to the beauty that lies within her. And at the end of this, what ended up being a 4-hour drive to the customer and then a long drive home, she says at the end of the discussion, I'm going to go home and have a conversation with my husband. Because her heart was changed and the truth was being revealed to her. Another one. I worked with a woman in a short-term contract. She was a diehard feminist. She was very angry at the world and all things that Western civilization represented. And we would have these knockdown, drag-out, just steel-sharpening steel arguments. One day I said, fine, I'm not going to convince you through power of the intellect or power of the argument. I knew there was a chapel nearby. Why don't you just come to the chapel? Just come and sit for about 5 minutes in the silence and see if anything happens. Because I knew in her pride and in her kind of, she wasn't going to be gamed or one-upped by me. She's like, fine, lunch, see you there, you know. And, you know, conflict, right? It's phenomenal, rich soil. We go into the chapel nearby, and there's this incredible icon of the face of Christ. One of the old, 1,000-year-old beautiful images represented in this church. And you just sit there, and it's just this sense of the sacred, Go to Notre Dame Cathedral in Paris, the prayers are like soaked into the stone, right? It was like that. It was just her and me. I love that, like God, and us. And I just let it happen. I mean, you can talk and break the silence. It was like, okay, Lord, lay up, here you go. It's the longest 5 minutes of my life. But then she stops, looks at me, comes out of the chapel, and she's chastened. She says, literally, these are her words, that face has all the answers. It's an adventure, guys. It's an adventure. One last story. I was traveling through Atlanta to the Carolinas. And if you've been to Atlanta before, it's in the south. Extremely volatile weather down there. Lots of hurricanes blow through. Lots of, the remnants of tornadoes out of Oklahoma comes east and into that valley there. So the airport is routinely hammered by act of God weather. It's just amazing. So sure enough, I arrived from my flight from California. I'm supposed to be on my connection 45 minutes later. Plane breaks. They get a new aircraft. They reboard us. By the time they reboard us, the afternoon, like clockwork, roll of thunderstorms comes in. We end up in what's called a DOT hold, Department of Transportation hold. We're on the jetway. The plane is getting rocked left, right, and center by the storm, the violence of the winds and the rain. They finally tow us back to the gate. So my meeting, that's tomorrow morning, 10 a.m., this is about 10 p.m., so 12 hours out from my meeting. I've got a 7-hour drive ahead of me to get to Charlotte, North Carolina. But in the 3 hours of being encased in this fuselage and waiting for the weather to wind up, I look over, and the gentleman next to me, a young college guy, is reading 2 Peter. And you just have that little nudge from God. So I said, hey, are you trying to get home to Charlotte? He's like, yes, I am. I said, how about you jump in the car with me? I need a bit of company so I stay awake, and I'd love to talk to you about 2 Peter. And he looks at me like, well, what's it going to cost me? I said, don't worry about it. My company paid for the car. Let's get you home, but if you don't mind, I'd love to have the company. Yeah, sure, let's do it. We jump in the car. Turns out to be a young man going through school. He's actually living with a religious superior or religious authority in his Protestant church. He's living apart from his girlfriend, who's in another city, so in a long-distance relationship. And he's trying to put together a core group of 5 guys who can live in accountability to one another. Because he wants the fullness of grace of what God offers, but he can't do it out of his own strength. And he was completely frustrated because his 4 other guys he picked and was relying on were flaking out. And he felt just so exposed and alone and naked. Suddenly we're on this conversation for 7 hours. We unpacked it, man. It was rich. It was holy. It was like 2 dudes going to Emmaus, and suddenly in the midst, Christ was recognized between them. Unbelievable stuff, guys. It reminds me of the old adage, to teach people how to sail, don't take them out to the woods, teach them how to chop down trees, teach them how to make lumber, teach them how to assemble ships. Tell them stories of the sea. One final item. As I was praying for you all and praying for this talk, there are people in this room, and don't raise a hand, you know who you are, where your workplace is a cross. Where your work, maybe even the people you work with, the function in which you find yourself in, maybe you're in a job that you really aspired for, and when you got into the midst of it, suddenly you just got woken up to this nasty surprise. It's a grind. It strips you of your dignity. It seems to reverse and erode this heart place in you. I've used the word apprentice several times in this talk. You guys are apprentices of the cross. And I want to offer you a message of hope. The cross always comes with the promise of the resurrection. And to put that on a point, I just want to share the following. This is from the Gospel according to Matthew. When Jesus has entered Capernaum, a centurion came to him asking for help. Lord, he said, my servant lies at home paralyzed, suffering terribly. Jesus said to him, shall I come and heal him? And the centurion replied, Lord, I do not deserve to have you come under my roof, but just say the word, and my servant will be healed. For I myself am a man under authority, with soldiers under me. I tell this one, go, and he goes. I tell that one, come, and he comes. I say to my servant, do this, and he does it. When Jesus heard this, he was amazed. And he said to those following him, truly I tell you, I have not found anyone in Israel with such great faith. And then Jesus said to the centurion, go, let it be done just as you've believed it would. And his servant was healed at that moment. For those apprenticing under the cross right now in your jobs, in your 9 to 5 hours, for those in this room, all of us, we will at some juncture in time face the inevitability of the cross, the redemptive invitation of the cross. There's one critical secret I would leave you with. If there's one thing you walk out of this room with, please take this. It's my gift to you. How do you reject the false self and become the true and best version of yourself day by day and season by season? It's presented in this gospel account. Look at the fact that Jesus is astonished. It's the only mention of the omnipotent Son of God being astonished in Scripture. It's the only time, guys. So there's a clue. What happened? The word in Greek is thou matseo. He's amazed and astonished because he's confronted by a centurion who understands authority. He's an officer. He's probably in command of about 100 soldiers, but he himself is also under authority. And in the moment of his amazing words, he yields himself, his servant, the pain of knowing his servant was dying, to the authority of God. The linchpin, the collision of the lived experience of your life with the sacrament of the present moment occurs in this key question. And it's this question upon which the restoration of your heart occurs, day in and day out. Is your life yielded under authority to God, setting aside all idolatrous self-determination in such a way that your strength, your capabilities, what you offer to the world comes from Him? And again, to those in this room suffering, is it not beautiful that at every Mass we say those same words? We are before the holy altar of God. Jesus is present in the most holy body and blood of the sacrament of the Mass. And we say the same words of the centurion. The church is leading us to this. Lord, I'm not worthy you should enter under my roof, but only say the words and my servant shall be healed. My focus this morning, guys, has been on the workplace, but this is a message that's broad. It includes all attributes and circumstances of your life. Parenting, marriage, prayer life, difficulties, death of a loved one, the workplace. It applies across the tapestry that is your life. And I say to you, each and every one of you, your lives are a masterpiece. At 9:37 p.m. on April 2nd, 2005, in the octave of Easter, Pope John Paul II was called home to God. Bells tolled in this Vatican City and then fell silent. They would not ring again until the new Pope was elected. And as news spread that John Paul II was in his final hours, pilgrims began to stream into the eternal city to hold vigil and to pray. And this outpouring of grief, of love, of filial devotion would continue for some days until his funeral 6 days later. And during that 6-day period, according to Roman police estimates, the beloved Pope was viewed lying in state by more than 18,000 people an hour. Close to 2 million streamed through St. Peter's to pay respects. And 6 years later, the church gathered to proclaim John Paul II Blessed, an event captured by his biographer, George Weigel. When the Catholic Church beatified John Paul II on May 1st, 2011, the church was bearing public witness to its conviction that this was a life of heroic virtue, a life that could be held up for others to emulate. And at the same time, the extraordinary response John Paul II drew from men and women who were neither Catholic nor Christians nor even religious believers bore testimony to the fact that a saintly life is a compelling life. Saints are men and women who have lived fully human lives through the power of grace. Amen.
I love hearing Simon's stories. The way we deal with our faith is to share our stories, to share the people who impact us and how we impact other people. And that's how Simon shares. I would personally like to thank him for making the trip here. It's a long way from San Diego. We have a next date that I would like you to take note of. December 4th. Bishop Don Boland is going to share with us at that next meeting. So thank you to everybody, and tell your friends and bring other people next time. Thanks very much.